Okay, this is film class week 8, part 7. I can't emphasize how the whole point of being a voyeur is to see and not be seen. That the peeping Tom who sort of looks at people having sex in their bedroom does not want to be seen, does not want to get caught. Um, Kyle MacLachlan does not want to get caught in the closet staring at Dorothy Valens taking her clothes off. Jimmy Stewart does not want to get caught in Rear Window spying on the neighbor. And that's why the craziest scene in the movie, in Rear Window, is when Thorwald looks directly at Jimmy Stewart and us, because Jimmy Stewart, like us, is a voyeur, because the movie audience also wants to watch without being seen, that he sees us. Um, it's an incredibly disturbing thing for the voyeur, because the whole point of it is to you get to see but nobody sees you. The idea that the whole time he was following Kim Novak, she knew, and that what he thought was natural behavior on her part was all an act to trick him, is an incredibly disturbing revelation. It means everything you thought you knew was wrong. It's like if you're spying on your neighbors and then it turns out that they're just putting on a crazy fake show to entertain you, it just destroys the whole thing, because what you thought you were getting was reality, like the way people act when they don't think anybody can see them. And it's the opposite. They know they're being seen. Um, it's an incredibly disturbing, sort of crazy, bonkers moment. Um, Notice, by the way, that the fact that she knew he was there the whole time is echoed by Judy. When Jimmy Stewart leaves her room and we see Judy, she looks at the camera, and it's like she knows if Jimmy Stewart was watching her but didn't want to be watched, but then it turns out she could see him. Now Judy seems to turn to us, the audience. We thought we were watching without being seen, and then she looks at us and she writes this sort of letter to Jimmy Stewart, but it's really to us, to tell us the twist and everything that happened in the movie, to kind of explain it. I forgot to mention this earlier, but one of the details I really like in the film in terms of costume design is that the first time you see Judy, guess what color she's wearing? Green, because it's the same color that Madeline was wearing the first time he saw Madeline. Okay. Um, okay. Let's talk about the real. I'm gonna stop here for a second and talk about the real disastrous nature of what has happened to Jimmy Stewart. It's the kind of thing that takes time to really sink in how bad this is, how truly bad this is. It's terrible to love someone and have them break up with you. Obviously, if you've ever been dumped, it's not a good feeling. To be in love and to get rejected, it's terrible. It's even worse to love someone and they die, because then it's like, because when you break up with somebody, it's like you're probably never going to get back together with them. See Midge, right? Midge, something went wrong. We don't know what happened with Midge and Scotty, but right, Midge loved Scotty, and then they broke up, and it's terrible. But she's still a little bit hopeful they could get back together. When Kim Novak dies, it's like he loved her, and now she's dead, which means he'll never get to be with her again, and that's an even greater tragedy. He loved her and they had love together, right? They kissed and they were in love, obviously, and then she's gone. And it's a much harder tragedy to bear. Breaking up with somebody's terrible, but maybe you'll get back together. When someone dies, it's like you're definitely not getting back together, but at least, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. You had your time together and then she died. The tragedy of Vertigo is so much worse. It's so bad, because what has happened to Jimmy Stewart is neither of those things. It's not that he loved somebody and they broke up. It's not that he loves. It's not that he had a romantic relationship and they broke up, like with Midge. It's not like they had a romantic relationship and she died, like he thought had happened to Madeline and him. What's really tragic about this situation is that he loved someone that never existed in the first place. Because Madeline, not a real person. Judy's a real person, but Madeline was a character that Judy was playing and does not exist. There is no such person as Madeline. Um, we by the way, was Gavin Elster's wife, was she like that? We have no idea. Probably not. Probably Gavin Elster's wife was just some regular person. Um, um, but she probably so the tragedy here is that Jimmy Stewart fell in love with somebody who was a character and was never real at all. It was just Judy being the kind of person that Gavin thought would attract and ensorcel Jimmy Stewart. This is a worse tragedy because it's bad to break up with somebody, but maybe you'll get back together. And it's bad if you love somebody and they die, but at least you had what you had. What's happened to Jimmy Stewart is he lost someone who was never real in the first place, which means the entire romantic relationship, the entire personality that he fell in love with, not real. And that's really at you have to understand that aspect of the movie to understand the really tragic, tragic dimensions of this film. Um, it's worth pointing out, by the way, that Sigmund Freud, who I've mentioned earlier in this class when we are talking about Blue Velvet, had this idea that sort of little boys love their mother, and then they have to kind of find replacements because the little boy kind of wants to kill his dad and marry his mom, and it's like a whole crazy psychological theory. But the idea is that the kid kind of wants to get back to that unity with the mother, and he tries to achieve it later in life with romantic partners that never quite do exactly that idea of the mother and child in unison. But Freud points out that that whole mother-child in unison thing was never real to begin with. That's a fantasy that the child comes up with, so that for Freud, all love is like the movie Vertigo, where you are chasing after a unity that never existed in the first place. A sense of wholeness and completeness, the soulmate idea. You never had that. You're chasing after something to recreate something you had with your mother in the past, but that wasn't real either. It's just a kind of fantasy the infant conceives later in life. So Vertigo isn't just about Scotty, it's about all of us. And I'll talk more about that later as we go. Okay. Cool. All right. What's really sad about Judy's situation is that she tries very hard to be herself, because this is the paradox for her. Is that Scotty fell in love with Madeline, but Madeline's not real. Madeline's a character Judy was playing, but Judy actually fell in love with Scotty for real, and that's what causes the tragedy, because she is essentially in love with a guy that doesn't know who she is or anything about her. Notice that the colors that she wears are very different from the ones that Madeline wore. So Madeline wore these sort of the gray suit and the beautiful green dress, and that Judy wears like purple. Even when she sort of looks like there's a scene of a silhouette where you get to see her like this, but she's facing the other direction. It's like the wrong way. She wears purple, she wears yellow, she wears brown. These are not colors that Kim Novak wore earlier in the movie when she was being Madeline. Jimmy Stewart is sort of frustrated with Judy for not being Madeline, which is crazy because Madeline is 100% Judy's invention, and she could become Madeline, but she'd be playing a character, and then she'd end up in a relationship with somebody where she was fake all the time. So she tries to get Jimmy Stewart to get interested in who she is as a person. And like a lot of people struggling with toxic masculinity, he doesn't give a shit about her. All he wants is the fulfillment of his fantasy life. He doesn't care who she is. Her job for him is to fulfill the fetish. And what does he fetishize? Madeline, who is not real and never was. And so just as you have foot fetishists who don't seem to care about the woman as a person, but only about feet, Jimmy Stewart doesn't care about Judy as a person. He only cares about her ability to look a lot like Madeline. And so he tries to transform her into Madeline, which is hilarious because she is Madeline, and he doesn't know that at this point in the movie. But she is Madeline, and he tries to kind of make her do this, and he ignores her. He doesn't give a shit about Judy. He ignores her once. She tells him 100 times that she likes this dress. She wants to eat over here. She wants to do this thing, and he won't pay attention. He only hears what he wants to hear, and what he wants to hear is that she's going to be like Madeline, and he is obsessed with it. And it's a whole other layer to the tragedy, is him trying to get back to where he was, but the place that he was never real to begin with, and so it is doomed to fail. Because even if Judy could pretend to be Madeline all day, Judy would be trapped in a fantasy role that wasn't real. That's crazy to be in a relationship your whole life and pretend to be somebody you're not. That's nuts. All right, pick it up in the next video.